Have you ever read a spiritual scripture and felt slightly excluded? You open a sacred text and it says, a man should control his mind. A man must act without attachment. A man who is wise. And somewhere inside you think, why always man? Was spirituality written only for men? Was wisdom gendered? Were women an afterthought? Or are we misunderstanding a 2000-year-old operating system through a modern lens? Stay with me, because what looks like exclusion might actually be something much deeper. Today, we read ancient text with modern sensitivity, and that's not wrong. We live in a time where identity matters, representation matters, language matters. So, when someone reads the Bhagavad Gita and sees Krishna speaking to Arjuna, a man, giving instructions like a man who is detached, a man who has conquered himself, it can feel one sided, especially if you are a woman thinking, was this not meant for me? Or even as a man, you might think, why is spirituality always framed around the male experience? But here is the real question. Are we reading language or are we reading meaning? Because sometimes the word you see is not the idea being communicated. Let's zoom out for a moment. In ancient Sanskrit, much like Old English, the masculine form was often used as the default linguistic structure. It wasn't necessarily exclusion, it was grammar. When texts use words like Purusha or Nara, they're often translated as man. But Purusha does not simply mean male. Philosophically, Purusha means the resident of the city, and the city here in this context is body. So, who is the resident? The soul. And the soul, the Atman, has no gender. When the Gita says a man should be detached, it's not talking about male biology. It is talking about human consciousness. But we see the English word man and our modern brain reacts. And that reaction is understandable. But here is a twist. The scripture was never addressing gender. It was addressing awareness. Now let's add historical context. At the time these texts were written, society was structured differently. The public, legal, and social representative of a household was usually the male head, the karta. If you were writing a manual for a company today, you might address the employee. In ancient society, the employee of the cosmic system was the male head of the household. Not because women were incapable, but because he was the one legally accountable. So, the instruction manual addressed the one whose decisions affected the family externally. It was a protocol, not a value judgment. And here is something fascinating. In chapter 10, verse 34 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, of feminine qualities, I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. He doesn't say these are qualities women should have. He says, I am these, meaning the divine expresses itself through what we call feminine traits. That changes everything because now we see something deeper. The wisdom was never owned by one gender. It was distributed across human nature itself. Let me flip this. What if the scriptures weren't excluding women? What if they were correcting men? Pause, think about it. In ancient times, men were often the ones involved in war, politics, land disputes, power structures, external aggression, external ego, and external expansion. So, who needed a stronger instruction on detachment? Who needed reminders about ego? Who needed correction for ambition and greed? The detachment code was given heavily to men because they were more prone to external power struggles. Meanwhile, women were seen as the architects of the household. If a man left home to meditate in the forest, society continued. If a woman left home in that era, the entire structure would collapse. Children wouldn't be raised, the household would dissolve. It wasn't suppression, it was structural preservation. Now, does that apply to 2026? Not necessarily. But we cannot judge a 2000-year-old system without understanding its architecture. Imagine you find an old software manual from 1995 and it says to install this program, insert the floppy disk. And you say, why are they excluding USB users? They are not. USB didn't exist. The instruction was written for the system available at that time. That's what we are doing when we read ancient texts. We are applying a modern user interface to legacy documentation. And instead of translating the essence, we sometimes fight the vocabulary. So, how do we apply this wisdom today without feeling excluded or defensive? Here are three mental shifts. 1. Translate the principle, not the pronoun. When you read man, mentally replace it with human consciousness. Don't get stuck in grammar, extract the principle. Ask, what is the teaching correcting inside me? Ego, attachment, fear. That is the real target. And second, separate social structure from spiritual truth. Social systems evolve, spiritual truths don't. The social structure of ancient India is not your reality today, but detachment, awareness, discipline, compassion, those are timeless. Don't confuse cultural packaging with the eternal principle. And third, own the teaching personally. Instead of asking why didn't they address women more, ask what is this teaching applies to my life right now. Because maturity is not about whether the text mentions you, it's about whether you can extract growth from it. This is what emotionally mature people understand. Wisdom is not about representation, it is about transformation. And here is something powerful. You are not excluded from spiritual wisdom. You are consciousness having a human experience. And consciousness has no gender, no label, no limitation. The battlefield in the Gita was external, but your battlefield is internal. Your doubts, your attachments, your ego, your fear. And that war belongs to every human being, not just men, not just women, everyone. Today we are standalone individuals. In ancient times, identity was collective. Man represented a household. Household represented a lineage. Lineage represented society. Now you represent yourself. So yes, it feels different, but that doesn't make the wisdom invalid. It simply means we must translate it responsibly. And maybe instead of arguing with the ancient language, we can evolve its application. Remember the question from the beginning? Were women excluded? Or are we misreading a language protocol? The answer is this. The scriptures were addressing the soul, and the soul never needed gender correction, only ego correction. So the next time you read, a man should control his mind, pause and ask, is this about biology or is this about consciousness? Because the real question is not why did they say man? The real question is, can you detach from your own ego long enough to receive the teaching? And maybe that is the real spiritual test.